Hello and welcome to the Intentional Brief, your weekly video update on the one big thing in cybersecurity news for middle market companies, their investors, and management teams. I'm your host, Shay Colson, managing partner at Intentional Cybersecurity, and you can find us online at intentionalcyber.com. Today is Monday, October 6th, 2025, and we're going to see the interplay here today between security and compliance, looking through the lens of the newly finalized CMMC, or Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, here in the US, and talk a little bit about the nuance of how these things come together to either work well or to be somewhat in conflict. But let's start first here by zooming out a little bit and providing some context around this new mechanic, the CMMC being put in on the entire defense industrial base, or DIB here, or DIB here in the United States. Having finalized the rule known as CMMC 2.0 last month, these controls now require that the controls outlined in NIST 800-171 Revision 3 must be met by all future defense contractors who handle CUI, or Controlled Unclassified Information, also called CUI. That's new, as this requirement is in terms of tying it to funding awards. What's not new is the controls themselves in 800-171, or the fact that the defense sector has had to adhere to them now. There's just a financial incentive to do so. So these controls, which have been both widely and freely available for nearly a decade, since December of 2016, lay out a common sense and comprehensive approach to cybersecurity, and through this comprehensiveness end up with about 110, exactly 110, controls that provide a very solid foundation for a security program. They're also somewhat cumbersome to implement in an enterprise at scale, or an enterprise with legacy technology stacks, or if you're really truly starting from zero from a security perspective. And that's where the rub between compliance and security can really be seen. I think it's far easier to achieve compliance with a regulatory scheme if you have a robust security program in place than it is to take a compliance-oriented approach and try and shim that or shoehorn that into a security goal. CMMC is only one of many regulatory and compliance programs that you might have heard of. There have been others driving this point home for years, whether that's the ISO 27001 series, the SOC 2, Type 1, Type 2 compliance pieces, high trust, HIPAA, and any other number of frameworks where there is a defined set of controls that must be met. But in short, if you're just looking to check a box, i.e. just to be compliant, you're likely to look for ways to make that simpler and more cost effective or rapidly deployed to achieve. And that often comes in the form of perhaps a scope adjustment, as we see sometimes in the certification world in ISO and SOC, or perhaps it's just doing the bare minimum to meet a requirement, or again, check that box. But this approach, this check the box approach, will do only just that. Check that box. Managing risk and building a risk-based approach to a security program is a far different endeavor that requires nuance and trade-offs and investments and a deep understanding of not only your IT environment, but also your overall business, your customers, and your strategic goals, so those things can align. And then by focusing on this larger risk management effort, translating those efforts into demonstrable compliant mechanics across the enterprise becomes, I think, a much simpler task, combined with the benefit of actually managing the risk, actual risk reduction during this compliance process. And that's present regardless of whether you achieve or even pursue that compliant status. So does that mean that there's no value in compliance exercises? No, I don't think that at all. But I do think that they should be seen for what they are in large part, which is sales enablers, or in some cases like CMMC, now table stakes. Literally everybody in the defense industrial base is going to have to be CMMC compliant. So that's no longer a differentiator. It is necessary but not sufficient, you could say. So to set yourself apart, take a risk-based approach. This will make compliance more straightforward. It will help you actually manage the risks that your business is facing, and it will give you room to differentiate yourself from others who are merely just out to check the box. From a fundraising perspective, we're looking at more than $36 billion in newly committed capital last week, led by CVC Capital Partners, who raised 10.4 billion euros for their fourth direct lending fund. We also saw Brookfield raise over $4 billion in the first close of their fourth infrastructure debt fund. PAI Partners put up 3.6 billion euros in a single asset continuation fund of Froneri, the ice cream maker who includes the Haagen-Dazs brands, and Percheron Capital, who put up a $1.6 billion single asset continuation fund for their Portco, big brand tire and service. Despite the big numbers this week and the focused effort on those single asset raises or focused fund constructs, we also saw an article in the Wall Street Journal this morning asserting that private equity funding has actually slumped this year for the second year in a row through September. So more and more, the theme is that both things can be true. And being able to navigate that dichotomy, that duality, will be a tremendous skill set to have in the weeks, months, and years ahead. A reminder that you can find back issues and written transcripts of these videos at intentionalcyber.com. You can now sign up for our monthly newsletter, The Intentional Dispatch, also on that site, and we will see you next week for another edition of The Intentional Brief.